Hello team, we need your help. We always want to improve and grow this podcast, and we want to ask you, our valuable listeners, to provide us with some feedback. In the description below, we have included a little questionnaire for you, and I promise it won't take more than 5 minutes of your time. To make this even better, at the end of the 5 weeks, we're going to pick 3 lucky winners from a hat, and we're going to send out a ton of process programming swag to you guys. So thank you for all the love, support, and thank you for helping us to make this podcast even better. Matthew Patterson, welcome to the Process Podcast, my friend.
Mr. Haynes, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here at last. It took you 217 episodes to get the nod, but
Have you been counting down the days?
I've been sort of, kind of holding it off as much as possible, but, you finally pinned me down.
To be fair, asking Jack to be on the podcast
was offensive to me, yes.
If I put myself in your shoes, I can see how that's a bit offensive.
Yeah, but, we learn, we move on. You've clearly learned. You got me in soon after, so, forgiveness is everything, my friend. We move forward.
We move forward. Well, Patterson, let me ask you, who
it's like being back at school and being picked last for football.
Did that ever happen to you?
Never last, but certainly behind Jack and probably behind you and a few others in the year. At least as my years went on, I was number one for about 3 years, and then everyone just,
You were actually, well, okay, we're jumping the gun a little bit. Okay, because you're starting to allude to the fact that we know each other and we go way back. But pause. Before we get into that, who are you and what do you do?
So, my name is Matthew Patterson. I grew up in Hong Kong, moved here when I was 7. I have a lovely wife and son who I adore to the hills and back. And I run a company called Minisport. So we serve as a kind of tasting platter for children to try 6 sports through one program. So each term the sports change with the kind of intention of giving kids the most well-rounded introduction to sport by the time they get to the age where they want to start playing for actual teams. So, we can get into exactly why I do that later, but that's who I am. And that's been my life so far, really. I started Minisport when I was 24, so that's 12 years ago. And just after Coastal, I guess, maybe a couple of years after you guys. But it's been a bit of a journey. Obviously, we can touch on everything that encompasses, including COVID and all the rest of it. But so here we are, father of one, loving husband, and owner of Minisport.
Okay, well, we are going to most definitely dig into Minisport because there's lots of questions, and I'd love to just uncover that story a little bit more.
Sure.
And how you built such a successful business. But before we get into that, I'd like to talk about our relationship. So you just mentioned you moved to Hong Kong when you were 7.
Yes, I was 7 when we moved here, maybe 8, around there.
So my question to you is, what is your first memory that you have of me?
Of you?
Yeah.
That's actually a good one. The first memory I have of you was actually playing in a school rugby match, and I'd never played rugby. Came to Hong Kong knowing how to play football and tennis. So my dad was an avid tennis player, but in North London there wasn't really much going for kids that went to kind of public school or local school, if you like, state school. It was football in the playground, and that was pretty much as far as it went. So the first memory I have is of you essentially analoging me in a Kellett School rugby match. I was getting this ball. I had no idea what it really was or what we were trying to do with it. And I just had you in my ear constantly telling me left, right, throw. And it was, I have to say, it was quite a harrowing experience. It's certainly one I've never forgotten to this day. And how often you have sort of flashes of memories. It's just a moment. I feel like I can remember about 3 or 4 minutes of that game. It was so intense. I was a kid who was completely out of my comfort zone. You clearly weren't, of course, like a very good rugby player yourself. And actually, it turns out that was the only rugby game I ever played. So, one and done. But
must have been like your first year at Kellett, was it not?
Yeah, I think that was my first year. So I came in, year 5. We were here. I went from year 3 in the UK and actually skipped a year when I came here, due to where I was, the months I was born. So I ended up in your year, which is, quite fateful. It was only because I couldn't get a space in the other year beneath that we actually ended up in the same year. And obviously those kind of, moments in life have the butterfly effect essentially, and there's several more of those I can talk about in my life, clicks of a button, slides of a door that have resulted in, me being here essentially right now. So, that's one of the
First
key
memories.
moments of my life, really, is, ending up in your year, and then obviously, being your friend and everything that came with that.
So it's funny that you say you have a few flashbacks to that rugby match. I actually have a few. I got one. I genuinely think I got one flashback, and that flashback is actually you.
Good.
Yeah. So, okay, correct me if I'm wrong. It was at Sandy Bay, right?
It was at Sandy Bay.
It was a half pitch.
It was on the,
Yeah, so we were playing across the football pitch.
That's correct.
I can't remember who we were playing.
I couldn't tell
Kennedy
you.
School, maybe?
I think it might have been Kennedy
We were just
School.
wearing like red T-shirts.
Yeah.
And I remember you, because you had like big puffy blonde hair.
Oh, yeah.
Like you had like the Nick Carter middle parting mushroom cut.
Yeah. I was actually an Aaron Carter fan, but yeah.
But Aaron Carter, I don't know if Aaron Carter was even born then, mate.
No, I might have been ahead of him.
Yeah, Nick Carter was the original curtains, because remember I got that when I went to West Ham. I was a couple of years behind you.
Right, okay.
Yeah, but I do remember you were small.
Very small.
You were very small when you first arrived. I mean, I was small, but you were smaller than me, so that made me feel good. Yeah. And I remember you just getting the ball and running straight across the field. Like, like generally speaking, we want to run towards the opposite try line. Yeah, but I remember you just getting the ball, seeing your face, and you just looked like you were shitting it. So you just ran sideways really fast.
With the ball or without the ball?
You had the ball. Yeah. So all eyes were on you. And I was probably like kind of just stood back a bit, probably like you said, like shouting instructions at you to try and get you to run at least the right direction. And then you just launched this ball over your shoulder, like just a no looker. Just launched this ball back. And I think it kind of came towards me, and then that is my only flashback of that game.
Well, the funny thing is, you guys all probably thought, because I wasn't a bad football player when I came in. You probably saw me in the playground, thought, oh, this guy can, in Hong Kong, if you can play football, you can probably play a bit of rugby.
Yeah.
So you guys probably walked into that game thinking I was half decent, which clearly you quickly found out wasn't the case.
Fair play to you, though, for actually saying yes and doing it. You probably didn't have a choice, to be honest.
Probably not, but anyway, it's definitely that's definitely the first memory I have of you, for sure.
So my first memory is actually not that memory. I think my memory is before that. And I think it was your very first, probably like your first or second day at Kellett School. We were, because we're the second from the oldest year at Kellett. Kellett's our primary school, by the way, for those listening.
Yeah.
So we were allowed to play on the top floor. Remember?
That's correct. Yeah.
Right. So we would always play football on the top floor and have those like imaginary goals. And I remember
with the sponge ball that was falling to pieces.
Yeah. And I remember seeing you do a Cruyff turn. Remember the Cruyff turn, like when you flick it behind you?
That's the only skill I really had.
Yeah. That was like your go-to.
I brought that to Hong Kong.
I think you did. So I remember seeing you. We were just playing football at lunch, and we're like, "Who's this like blonde, shaggy-haired kid?" I was going to use a different word there, but we'll say kid. And then you start whipping out these Cruyff turns in this football at like lunchtime football, and I was like, I can't. This guy's really fucking good. Maybe I was one that then put you forward to rugby team to like, this guy's going to play rugby.
Yeah.
That was your one only. Okay. Yeah.
So that didn't get me far on the rugby pitch anyway.
Got you a bit further in football though.
Absolutely. Well,
okay. So my next question, if that's your earliest memory of me, I want you now to describe Ed Haynes in primary school. I'm going to describe you.
This would be all about you. Ed Haynes in primary school. The saxophone is the first thing that just comes to mind.
That's funny because I didn't play a saxophone.
It was an accordion. No, what was it? No, what was it? It was a brass instrument.
It was a wood instrument.
It was a clarinet, wasn't it? Yeah, sorry. I mean, there was a saxophone that featured in some other sort of capacity throughout our childhood. I can't remember where that was. I just have
Ant.
Ant was a sax. Okay,
I mean, I expect most of the world to get us confused, but having known you since I was 7 years old, I'm quite disappointed that you've actually mixed me up.
Yeah, the clarinet definitely was one of the first. I think the haircut as well, because I'd obviously moved on to the sort of middle part in sort of a trendy kid from London look, whereas you had this mushroom cut that had clearly been, extended from year one all the way through to year 5. But yeah, I think that's
my mum listens to this podcast, by the way. She's the one that cut that hair.
Well, Lil, she should, she got the message by now. You shaved it all off now, so clearly she's told you to redirect that. Other than that, I think, I can't really remember. I just feel like those memories, they all come down to there's 2 or 3 glancing, sort of like, there's a lot more memories obviously in high school that we had together. But I'd certainly say, on that rugby pitch was definitely one of them. And then always the clarinet. I think because Kellett School decided to put up a picture of you playing the clarinet in the school entrance, which obviously then every time I went back to see my brother, who was younger than me, in his school plays and all that kind of stuff, it was reinforced that you played the clarinet, even though I forgot the actual instrument just then. So yeah, I think those were the two things that. And actually, I think one of the other ones was you always wanted to be the star man in any school performance. I think did we do Grease Lightning?
But I never got it though.
Never got it. But you were definitely trying to do the star role from the sort of supporting positions, which was interesting.
I always tried to get the lead role in this because we had a school production every year.
Yes,
and that was sick. To be honest, my memories of primary school was spending more than half the year just doing that school production.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the Royal Variety Show, didn't we? And we had Grease Lightning, I think, one year as well.
And we had Hot Chocolate, Sexy Thing.
Oh yeah,
we dressed as muscle
Full
men.
Monty.
I reckon that might have been the start of like my body image insecurity issues.
Oh yeah, maybe.
Yeah. Anyhow,
maybe.
I always wanted to be the like the lead because mum and dad always made us watch like musicals, like West End type productions.
Right. Okay.
So I watched a lot of that growing up.
Technicolor Dreamcoat.
Exactly.
Yeah,
all
that kind of thing.
And I actually used to watch that and see the lead role and be like,
what
That'd be so sick.
Yeah, what a guy.
I would love to be that guy in the middle, just like
spotlight
stealing. Like I would love to be Joseph and the Technicolor Dreamcoat. So every time we had the productions, we would always have like auditions right at the start. So it'd be like, okay, this is a role. Who wants to put themselves forward as the role? And I would literally put myself in for like every decently big role, and I would never get it.
Yeah. Well, you realise at that point that you actually have to be able to sing and dance, which is kind of a bit of a problem.
Well, I think the year 6 one, which is like, okay, I've missed out on this lead role every year. It's my last year. Surely I've got to get something.
Yeah, absolutely. Even just through sympathy, if anything.
What I ended up being was, do you remember the final song where it's the song Children? Like, din 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 din.
Get your clarinet out. Just play it quickly for me.
Yeah, we the whole year comes out to do that, and that's like the finale.
Okay.
Mate, I was on the corner, front row corner, and I had a wooden stick with a ribbon on it.
Oh, good.
And all I had to do was just make little waves, like those rhythmic dances.
Little ripples.
I was gutted. It was like brilliant. 5 girls and me, and
Excellent.
I was like, "How is this happening?"
Well, we did peak later though when it came to dancing.
So we
dabbled into that slowly. I don't know if your listeners have ever heard about these.
No, they haven't. We entered a dance competition.
We did a couple of them actually.
West Island School,
West Island School was one of the few pieces of silverware I won in my
Primary
life.
school, that was good. That was what did we dance to?
Primary school,
Back.
we did Backstreet's Back. I remember that's actually one of the memories I have of you. Or was it Fulton?
That was a bit later.
No, it was Fulton. They came in and said, "Oh, guys, I've been listening to Backstreet Boys. It's pretty cool. I reckon we've got to do the dance." Was it you, or was you that did that? Because
remember,
we roped Fulton in, so we were the 3 Backstreet Boys.
Because we had. I remember that actually quite distinctly. This is a bit later in primary school.
This was the last year of primary.
We had school camp where we were all staying in tents. Remember? And I remember Mrs. White, I think the PE teacher, was like, "Are you boys ready for the dance competition next week?" And we were like, oh my God, like completely forgot we signed up for that. Been like, oh shit, yeah, we're totally good, we've got it. I think we finished camp, and I think like the next day, we all had a sleepover at mine.
Right,
I was like, boys, we are going to sleep over
Smash
at mine, and we're going to choreograph a dance, and we're going to crush this competition in like 5 days. And I think,
absolutely.
I remember like we cleared out my living room.
Mum and Dad remember that now.
Mum and Dad like cleared out the table and basically created like a center stage in my apartment.
And this was actually your one last chance to show Kel at
this
school.
This was my last
Who should
chance.
have been the main lead in these concerts.
Exactly. Yeah, I think
after that they decided you just do the ripples, But that was good.
That was good. And we won. We won junior trio. I still actually have that trophy.
I had it somewhere.
I imagine you still got it.
My wife does a clean out every now and then. We move house or whatever happens, and she's like, "You really keeping?"
I don't reckon you've won any other trophies about.
No, probably not. Did we not win a trophy for the one in secondary school that we did? Because that was a similar story. That got to the end of Horizons Week, which
we're not a secondary school. We're a primary school still.
Okay, all right.
Okay, so I think my memories of you in primary school were big, shaggy blonde hair. Very small, you're actually quite quiet when you
very shy.
Yeah, very shy when you first came to primary school. And I actually think when I think back at myself, although I wanted to be the lead person, I think I was quite quiet and shy as well. That's my memory of primary school. I don't know. Yeah,
no, I don't think we didn't really have too many at that stage, like really out there. There were quite a few quirky kids but I don't think we were particularly. No, I think there was a shy side to both of us growing up. To be honest,
both loved football a lot. I remember thinking like you were just unbelievable at football. You were definitely like.
I thought I was good as well at the time.
You were good. And yeah, I remember sleepovers at your house, always thinking you had a nice house.
Yeah.
Repulse
Yeah.
Bay back then.
Yeah, oh yeah,
Before
that's
you
right.
moved to Potforlam.
Yeah.
Just always thought it was just your family just looked after the apartment quite nicely.
Yeah, no, they did.
And I
They
always
did.
thought that was nice.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move forward to secondary school.
Sure.
So basically, we both finished primary school. We moved to the same secondary school.
Yes, we did.
Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna ask you. Transitioning from primary school to secondary school. You know, when we had that summer holiday, you're coming into secondary school for the very first time, very first day at West Island School.
Yeah.
What are you thinking?
I remember it wasn't. Well, I remember firstly the class I got put into was kind of like I was looking around going, what? Like I wasn't put with any of the people I knew. I mean, you had a decent. Tang was a good dynasty.
I had Russell, I had Fulton.
Ming was struggling, so you know. That's what I was in.
You were
I was Yuan. My sister and brother in Ming. For some reason, they put me anyway. So I remember I had quite like a butterfly feeling. I was quite a shy kid. Obviously, I dealt with one transition already coming from London to Hong Kong. So that was something I was just coming to terms with in this new school. And bang, you're moving into another school. But I do think. I think by that point, I'd kind of, when I first came to Hong Kong, my mum actually found some diaries that I was keeping.
I was journaling
back then?
I
was journaling at 8, 9 years old. I was actually, because this is one of the things that breaks my mum's heart. I was very literate as a child. She took quite a lot of my early years off, and she's a teacher, so I could read and write by 3 or 4. One of her earliest memories was me writing a 12-page thing about Joseph in his Technicolor Dreamcoat in London when I was 7 years old. I could write. And I had this book. So when I came to Hong Kong, I was writing, going, how can my parents ever take me away from London? How am I ever going to be a Tottenham football player if they're in Hong Kong? All of this stuff that a 7-year-old would think. And it breaks my mum's heart whenever she talks about this. And she found the books. She was secretly reading my diaries when we first came here. So yeah, I mean, I'd kind of just gotten over that, and then obviously coming into West Island was just another change. But I think I had overcome that first couple of periods. I'd just gotten to terms with Hong Kong, and I could see that resentment of my parents moved me here. I could start to see, we were hanging out in the Marina Club and football club and fruit platters after school, the sun shining, starting to think, life's actually not too bad here. So I think, yeah, definitely West Island School, the start of that was definitely something that I'd settled in much more by that point. Yeah. So yeah, I was much happier, I think, in Hong Kong by that point. I kind of, gotten used to it. A few trips back to the UK to kind of, realize that that's still there and everything's still going on. But yeah, I think, how did you find, the transition? Because it's something we've never spoken about, really.
I don't think I've actually spoken about it to anyone, but I think in recent years where I've done a lot of like reflecting back on like younger years and like who was I, what was I thinking? What are some of the things that maybe I carried over from a young age to like my adult life? And I remember thinking that this was like a new chance, a new opportunity. So it was like finishing Kellett. And I think my memories of primary school was that I was pretty quiet, like really liked sport, but I wasn't like, I don't think I was like the pack leader or like the jock or I wasn't that guy. I didn't think at all. I don't think we had one of those guys in Kellett. There wasn't like a ringleader.
I actually think that's a lot to do with their teaching style. I think they were quite good at making sure that everyone's strengths were shown in certain different areas, like these performances. It might have been reflex for them to just go, the kid who's really good at sport will be able to handle the stage. Yeah. But they seem to allow people to lead and follow in certain situations, which I actually think probably created quite an even sort of landscape when it came to characters and how people were acting.
Yeah, that's true. I never thought about that. But I think when I think about that transition, I remember I think subconsciously thinking, okay, like I've got a chance to like reinvent myself a bit now. And I think I just came in and was like, I just tried really hard to be popular at the start. I just like wanted to be liked by everyone. So would like quickly assess like who are the coolest kids from the other schools. And like, okay, I'm going to try and emulate them. Yeah. And like, maybe even like, I want to be, exactly. I want to be the dominant person. Okay. Yeah. I don't know where this, I have no idea where this came from. This need to do it. I think I actually then did it again at university subconsciously as well. And I felt like, I always talk about like the whole idea of like, wearing masks and like trying to people please and just be, be liked.
Must have loved COVID.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Nice. Classic Patterson, that one. But I think I had this there's fear of not being popular, not being liked.
Sure.
So I tried really hard to basically please everyone.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think that that started in the start of secondary school, and I think that very much continued for a
whole way
like
through.
secondary school. No, I think like by the time I got to like the last few years, I much more kind of found my groove in who I was and much more settled.
Got onto the top by that point.
I was, hey, when you're the boss, there's nothing else to do.
Yeah.
But then again, when uni came around, I think I did it all again. So when I think about you at secondary school, I see a very different Matt to primary school. Now I'm thinking about it and comparing the two. I think in our group of friends, we had a very cool upbringing in a sense that we basically had this one set of apartment buildings that all of us close mates lived in. And we had other close mates that lived like 10 minutes away.
Sure. Yeah.
So
Walkable distances.
Walkable distance. So I think we had like, must have been at one point like 8 to 10 of us.
Oh, yeah.
And like,
Definitely.
I was like, a stone's throw from you,
Yeah.
and you were a stone's throw from.
Some of us were in the same buildings. I lived next door to Andrew.
Next door or on top of each other, like literally a flat on top.
So it was great. Very unique.
Think having that was pretty amazing. Like we basically got to finish every day of school, walk home together, do all the mischief that we used to do, play sport.
Great.
In our complex, we had a tennis court, basketball court. We had like spaces underneath buildings where you could do recreational activities. So basically we had like a lot of just bonding time together. And a lot of that I think just revolved around like activity and sport of sorts.
Yeah, it was great.
But I think that I don't know at what point it was, but within our group, and we were a pretty tight group, you were like always the one to like push the boundaries. Like, primary school, you were like the good boy. And then when we got into secondary school, you became like, everyone else's perception of you was like, Matt, such a nice boy, works so hard, good footballer. But like, mate, as soon as the lights would go off at sleepover, you were the one saying, where I was sneaking out at 2 a.m. Or like, we're going to do this, or we're going to try this, or we're going to light our first cigarette, we're going to have our first beer.
I wasn't the first to do that, but anyway.
Are you sure? Pretty sure you were.
Well, I kept it going for a bit. And actually, I'll go back to one of the things. I know later we're going to talk about some realizations that, a certain course I did brought out in me, but one of them actually was, they say that if you really reflect in your life, there are moments where things change drastically and you are still carrying around that character that you were at that point, and it's not just the character you were but how you felt in that situation. So as I go back to the fact that I could read and write very well when I came over here, so even skipping a year I'd still finish whatever the task was. Miss Hine was our teacher at the time. I'd finished what I was meant to do. And in London, I was used to, if I finished before everyone, I start doing borders around my work and do nice little colouring things. And I remember doing that, finishing it, and then doing borders. And because obviously the difference between year 3 and year 5 is very different. They're preparing you for secondary school in year 5. I remember her standing on a table. Do you remember this? Were you in the class? Were you in my class at Keller, the one next door? I feel like you were next door. She stood on at least a table, like a chair next to my table, and shouted, "Stop it with your flipping borders." And she went at me. And I remember I'd only been there for maybe 4 months. And I remember when I really reflect on my life, that was one of the turning points where my relationship to education changed. Education had always been something that I felt very comfortable in, always very, no problems. There was no stress there for me. It was a comfortable place. And all of a sudden I was quite a shy kid, new environment, new friends, new school, everything like that in Hong Kong, and getting scolded by this person who literally stood on a chair above me. It changed my attitude towards education. I think that's fundamental to a lot of the reasons why I was a little bit more of a rebel in my secondary school years, because I remember just thinking my love for school and my faith in the system, even at that young age, had been fractured quite big. So I felt that now education is somewhere that I can feel comfortable and not show off, but kind of have a bit of suave about myself. I know what I'm doing in this environment. Now that had been taken away a little bit and rocked, I felt that it was outside the classroom where I had to be like the kind of, this is where I can thrive and show you guys what to do and that kind of thing. So I think there's a lot to do with that experience in the second part of my primary school years in Hong Kong.
At what point did you reflect and connect the dots on that being such a pivotal moment?
When I did the landmark. So
recently.
Recently. So when that was about this time last year. And it had been something that I'd kind of remembered in my life, but then to really dig into and really spending time, sort of an hour, really going through and replaying that. What was around you? How did you feel? Not just what happened, but how did you feel, and what elements of that kind of, whether it's scared or vulnerable little boy, are you still carrying through on your shoulders to this day? And that was definitely something that, from then on, this is one of the things I really realized myself. I try to prove myself to people, because back then it was always a case of, the classroom is pretty much your life, and the playground, I was a good football player, and in the classroom it was like, oh, Matt's finished first, he can sit and do borders. And it was when that had gone, it felt like, oh, where do I prove myself now? And I think a lot of that's carried into my adult life in terms of, I'll show you that I can run a company and all that kind of other stuff that we can go into later. But it's definitely an attitude that I think shifted in that time in my life, and it's been with me actually when I reflect through several stages of my life up until this point.
Isn't it so crazy that one instance, which was probably like 10 seconds long, had just changed the course of your entire life?
Oh, 100%. And I always say this to the coaches that we work, we have a team of 15 full-time coaches and a lot of other assistant coaches who are young. Maybe some of them are part-time and they're doing other things, and they can be stressed for various reasons. And I just always say to them, the kids are so fragile. We deal with much younger kids than the stage I was at. But even when I was 7, it was a vulnerable stage. We deal with kids that are 3, 4, and 5 and younger.
Which are very formative years.
Very formative. Yeah. And you just don't realize how a bad day on the job for you, something might be annoying you, you can't pay your tax bill, or someone's, your girlfriend's annoyed you, or whatever it is, your boss has annoyed you. You have such a position of authority and power, and it needs to be treated with complete respect, because I think one bad day at the office for you can actually can change the course of someone's life, their attitude towards certain situations. It's a very empowering position to be in. I think people need to understand that. I think that's an issue with teachers in general need to be treated with a lot more respect in society, whether you're a coach or whether you're a teacher, because it's kids are delicate, and you're putting them in the hands of people who, on a whim can just completely, change someone's life, quite frankly, within the split second. And I remember that could have been 10 seconds, like you said, and it's definitely had a big impact on my life to this day.
Crazy. Yeah, I just remember secondary school when you started going. I guess this was this is probably around puberty, right? Those fragile years for men where some people are starting early, some people are starting late.
Yeah.
And you start pushing the boat out with regards to right, let's start breaking some rules. And I think I was the opposite to you,
right?
Because, well, not the opposite to you, but in a sense that I would like to portray the image that I'm a bit rebellious. I like, taking the piss in classes, never did my homework, but I loved the game of being able to get away with it and basically blagging my way out of anything. Really good at doing that.
Getting away with the fun that you should probably be slapped on the wrist for.
Exactly. Yeah. And that was basically the whole of school for me was how close can I flirt with this, with a detention or a suspension and get away with it. I don't know. I just love that. But when it actually came to doing bad shit, I'd shit myself.
Again, I look back, actually, one of our really glaring memory, actually, that I have, and this is going to surprise you based on what you just said. I ruptured my ACL when I was 13, right? So, 2 years into secondary school. So then all of a sudden, I guess that kind of was a real big thing, because obviously it was football was the one thing that was keeping me going, right? At that time. And I ruptured my ACL, and I went to Scotland to get an ACL reconstruction. No, I got a meniscal transplant. They can't do ACL till you're much older. So anyway, I went for an operation on my knee, and I was 13. I remember sitting on my grand's porch at the front of her house in the freezing cold in January, and I was 13. And I remember calling you and saying, what's going on in Hong Kong? I'd only been gone a week at this point, and you said, we've all started going down to the waterfront and drinking and all this kind of stuff, and someone tried a cigarette the other day, and I was shocked.
Really?
And I was shocked. And I remember thinking, I've only left them for a week and look where they've gone. But I remember sitting with my mum after I came back from that trip and you guys going, oh yeah, we're going to go down to the waterfront, and me sitting there going, I really don't want to. I'd actually just rather sit here with my mum. This is quite warm and nice in here. I don't really want to go out and break the law. So actually, it's funny how we have these perceptions, because I think, yeah, surely once you got me going, there was no looking back. But yeah, I mean, that was it's interesting how we both have different accounts of,
Yeah, I very much remember you doing your ACL. I remember actually like you doing you actually going down. Yeah. And then I remember, being with you when you're on the crutches and, no one had ever been on crutches before.
Oh, it's horrible.
Your kids, that doesn't happen at that age.
No, it was horrible. I mean, Andy, Russell and I swapped positions at half time, because with that local team we were playing, we were just destroying. And one ball went in over the back. I went to clear it and the guy ran through my leg and just heard this pop. Yeah. And, it was a straight rupture. So obviously there was a weakness there. It could have happened another time, but that was a big moment in my life, because obviously then, that was something that really held me back in terms of football. But
yeah, interesting. I mean, I literally just put a post on Instagram like this week talking about the waterfront.
Oh, I saw that.
Yeah. So like me and Cammy go down there now. That's like our Sunday early morning. Go down, sit at the watershed, get some sun, jump in the water. Yeah. And I always just look down the beach and I'm like, oh my God, I can literally picture 14-year-old me downing a bottle of Boone's, smashing bottles, lobbing it into the ocean, Haynes Airlines and all that shit.
I know.
And then, but in my head, you started all of it.
It's amazing, isn't it? Because I didn't. I actually really didn't. Because I remember this memory. I was shocked. I was like, I've been gone for a week. These guys are down at this place called the Waterfront. I didn't even know where that was. Yeah. I know it wasn't you who started it, but you were definitely in it before I was. But yeah, and it's interesting how we have that kind of disparity in our experience, perception.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to fast forward now.
Let's go.
Okay, so let's talk about minisport, and I want to talk a little bit more about like the creation of minisport. Well, firstly, like give us an idea. Like, what is the scale of minisport? Like, what are you guys doing? How many people are you coaching? How many coaches you got? You got a franchise model now. Yeah.
So I started the company myself, coaching all the classes, and slowly built it up. And over the years, we built a team so we have 15 full-time staff, coaches, about 7 assistant coaches who we contract on a regular basis to do kind of half hours. And then we've got an admin team of 7 people and an IT guy in-house as well, who's really been helping us with the app development that we've been pushing. And yeah, we're just about to open in Singapore. In fact, it should be today or tomorrow that's being signed off on. So we're moving into basically when COVID shut down for a couple of years. Well, it was a funny business for us, kind of like it was for you. We could survive through it, but there were ups and downs within COVID, where complete nothing, and then little, depending on the grouping rules, we could open up and do stuff. So during those down periods, we started building a franchise model and getting all the information that a franchisee would need to replicate what we do, and we started developing the app. So obviously, we felt that you need your own software really to go and merit selling something to someone who's going to open up in a foreign country. So that the foundations of that started to come to actual fruition. It had been a concept for a long time, as had franchising, but COVID kind of provided that dead time. When I looked around and I thought, sometimes I would kill for my whole team to be off for 2-3 weeks so that we could do this other stuff that we've been thinking about, but we never have time for. So we did really harness the downtimes during COVID to move into where we are. We now reach about 1,200 kids a week through our weekly programs. We do a lot of parties and holiday camps and events. So that's kind of the scale we're at. Taiwan is a discussion that we kind of have ongoing at the moment, but Singapore is just about to sign the franchise deal, so that'll be launching in June.
And did you? Because when I think back to like younger Patterson, I don't think I would have ever envisioned you moving into like coaching.
Right.
Sport for sure, because you were you played a lot of sports. It was football, tennis, golf, kind of like sports that no one else was really playing actually other than football. So I think quite surprised when you went down the sporting route, and then obviously now you built this amazing business. There's lots of things that you've done I find very admirable. Like you've created freedom for yourself. I really respect that. You've created freedom and growth for your employees. You built a really sound business.
Thank you.
You're kind of pioneering the industry and what you're doing. But where did it all start? Like, did you know, like, as mates going back to like secondary school, maybe even university, like, did you know what you were going to be doing?
No, I always knew I wanted to start my own company. So Why? I don't know. I felt, again, I think it was one of these rebellion kind of things where it was,
I can do it.
I can do it, and I'm not going to do it the normal, boring way. I want it to be, different, and I didn't want to go down this 9 to 5 route. Another thing that I realized in the course that I was telling you about earlier is that they say there's often someone in your life that you compare yourself to, and you want to beat them. You want to get ahead of them. And for me, it was my dad, and it's nothing to do with how my dad brought me up. My dad was always hardworking, led by example, successful in his area. So he was a CIO of big, pharmaceutical companies, and big, telecom companies and that kind of thing. And I always just felt like if I didn't take my, the Patterson name to the next level, then I would have failed. That was just something that I had in my head, and I don't know where that came from. Perhaps some more reflection will find, I can really dig out why that was. But I had this massive pressure that was 100% put on myself. In fact, my dad was working so hard so that I probably didn't have to think like that. But the funny thing is, that's the effect that it had on me. So back to what they were saying in the course that I did is that there's always someone in your life that you try to take on, that you want to usurp, that you want to do better than, but you won't take them on in their own domain. So my dad was very corporate, very organization based, 9 to 5 type job, 9 to 10 in the night, if you like. So I think looking back that when I had that realization that he was the person that I was trying to take on in fields that he wasn't dominating. I look back, all the interviews I had in places with shirts and ties, I instantly just felt uncomfortable. And I had it down. I was like, I don't want to be a 9 to 5 person, but I guess there's a multitude of reasons as to why you might not want to be a 9 to 5 person. I think, if that's something that people are thinking, and they probably want to start thinking about why that is, because it might be the fact that there's someone in their life that they're trying to take on. So
your thing wasn't actually anything to do with 9 to 5 or being in a suit or an office. It was actually that this is your dad's area.
Kind of. I had no idea about that. Literally, this was a light bulb that went off a year ago. Subconsciously, when I look back on it, that kind of all made sense. My dad was much more low risk. I'm now much more high risk. I was doing stuff outside. He was doing stuff inside. There was just a different, there was a kind of need to do something that he wasn't doing and kind of succeed in an unorthodox fashion. I felt, that was also coupled with the whole, relationship with education breaking down, like I talked about earlier, and it just felt my need to kind of rebel. I think that was a lot of where it came from, and I had this deep-seated belief that, I needed to do stuff for myself, and this was, and then obviously start reading books and, idolizing people that have done that, and then it becomes something that you just believe is your destiny. And I think there's a lot to be said for when you have that kind of true belief, you start to believe, you kind of gravitate towards it, and the decisions you make in life start to lead you towards where you really believe you're going to end up. So that was. Well,
when I think about, I'm trying to think about, just hearing you talk about it and reflecting on me, like why did I get into running my own business? I remember mum and dad always made me do work experience. Right. So like in the summer holidays, they were like, you've got to get a job. And they put a lot of pressure on me to do it.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
And I think it was a good thing to do.
Oh, 100%.
I remember, I think when I was about 15 or 16, do you remember I started coaching at play sport. So I did it. I remember we had to do work experience for like our second last year at school or something like that. There was this work experience week.
Yeah, I do remember
we had to get a job.
That's right.
My job was play sport, and then they actually kind of like took me on as a coach. And I was like, I think that was my first like experience of coaching. I knew I didn't really want to coach kids, but I really enjoyed like
the passing
giving sport, like
helping others.
Exactly. Helping others, but specifically through the vehicle of sport and
movement,
exercise. And then I remember just doing all these, every time I did work experience, and pretty much all of them were in offices. I mean, like I did a bit of like wine delivery for my mum and things like that. But every time I was in there, I think about it the same way I think of school, which was school was very much a means to an end, right? I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
I'm going to finish it. I'm going to pass it, but I'm not fired up. There's nothing about this that excites me.
Yeah.
But I'm going to do it because I'm committed to doing it.
Sure.
So I'm not going to quit, but it's not an enjoyable process. And so when I would do all these jobs, that's exactly how it felt. It was like, this is a means to an end. I have to do it. I got to get some pocket money.
Yeah.
I got to get experience. So I have to, and I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
But I'm not enjoying it. Like there's no part of the work or the day to day that's like fulfilling me or interesting me whatsoever. Just like school. So it ends up being just a grind, right? You just you're clock watching. waiting for the day to end, can't wait to get out of there and then start your day type thing. And I remember just coming home every time and speaking to mum and dad and being like, is this normal? I'm like, is this actually okay? And they would say, because I don't think they ever alluded to the fact that they actually enjoyed their jobs. I had just imagined, I'm like, you're just experiencing what I'm experiencing, but you've done it for 40 years. I'm like, how is that normal? Like I hardly get through a week. How am I supposed to do this for the rest of my life type thing, right? And so I would just always have those questions. And I remember I would constantly ask them, like, but surely, like, do you love what you're doing? And they would just be like, I wouldn't necessarily love it, but like, there's no option. This is how it's kind of how the world works. You start low, you climb a ladder, you earn more money, you get more authority, and that's how like life unfolds. And I remember just thinking like, nah.
I think we're also very lucky that we're in a position where we have that luxury to, ask those questions, because I think a lot of other people, starting a company, my parents were very supportive at the beginning. They didn't ever invest, but they were very much, helping me a little bits and pieces. And I lived at their house for a couple of years, and, just things like that. And they were obviously, they had enough resources to kind of, support me. And, it was, I always knew I had a safety net. If it didn't work, then I always wasn't, so I think if you
take those risks,
a little bit more. I think we're lucky. Perhaps our parents and their generation, wasn't as common. My dad always says, back in my day when he was growing up, there's 5 or 6 jobs you did, some form of businessman, whatever that might mean, and then maybe a postman or you worked down at the local butcher or whatever. There was probably 7 or 8 jobs in the 60s that you could realistically go after. But I think there is right now we do have a slight crisis where people have too many options. You can do so many things within so many industries. There's almost too many things. We kind of grew up in a period where, I don't know, it just felt like we had a safety net. People were trying new things. We could see the signs of entrepreneurs and hearing these success stories and stuff. And it was something that I just assumed that I was destined for, quite frankly. But how I fell into it, going back to the coaching question that you asked, is an interesting story. So I also worked for PlaySport during my gap year. My gap year was very much an accidental gap year. I didn't plan to have a gap year. I was dating a girl here who's in the year below me. So she was always going to be staying here and we were going to have to do long distance. And anyway, just before our school formal, I remember sitting there, glass of champagne with the family, clicking this was in like March or something, clicking the UCAS form, clicking confirm, shutting the laptop and going and having a great old time. 3 or 4 months later, I open up the UCAS website and it says, oh, you're not in the system. So I call them up. They said, oh, there's 2 confirm pages. So you must have not clicked the second one. So all of a sudden I found myself in a position where I can now take a gap year by chance. So anyway.
I actually forgot about that happening. But
so that was a click of a button. Obviously, again, like we talk about the butterfly effect, that's just huge. If I had waited another 5 seconds, I might have seen the next page, click confirm, and I would have ended up at university. I was actually ironically offered a place at university at King's College, which was much better than the standard of university I should have been accepted into. They were going to offer me a place through clearing, but obviously as a young kid, I was, playing in my death metal band, going out with, my girlfriend at the time. I was like, I'm staying. And during that year is when I started working for PlaySport. So that was how I got my first taste of coaching. Obviously went off and did a business degree after that. And when I wanted to start my own company, I thought, this is something that I enjoy. It's something that makes a good difference to society. And it's something I feel, I can do better than what was out there.
Actually, hang on, but that was not your first business that you started?
It was not.
What was the first business you started?
So I started another business with a friend before Minisport. So that was fresh out of university. So I've done the coaching for a gap year, university, straight back to Hong Kong. And I actually got offered a job as a shipbroker. Really good position,
That's right. Management
trainee, everything was great. I was like really, really good position to be going into at the time. And a good friend of ours, from school, to be fair, I feel like I owe him a lot actually, because he was always high risk and he was very he had this belief that he was going to conquer the world.
He was such a Del boy.
He could sell anything. He sold me, to be fair. But one thing I remember at the pool at Scenic, the place where we grew up, we were hanging out in there and I said, I'm going to take this job. And he said, you should start a business with me. You've always wanted to work for yourself, all this kind of thing. And he really kind of convinced me to take that route. Now, people would rather cry together than laugh alone. He was one of those. He'd rather have a failing business with someone else than, a business that's successful. And he kind of long story short, we spent a year trying to build a teaching agency that, kind of resulted in nothing more than sort of late night brainstorms and not a lot of actual sales and stuff. So when that eventually, after a year of that capitulating, I then thought I need to sell something. So I went into wine sales for a year, which was fantastic. Door-to-door sales, similar to your mum's business, door-to-door sales, going up and down streets, taking notes of all the restaurants on the street and then sending them to my boss. He'd go, no, 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 yes, yes, yes. I'd walk down the other end and try and sell them wine, which I didn't really know much about at the time. But it was a really good experience. It was actually during a wine sales call. I was out in Sai Kung trying to sell wine, and I went into Bookazine, probably for the aircon, to be honest, and saw the 4 Hour Work Week, and I read that book, and 2 weeks later quit my job and started Minisport. So that was one of the books.
I remember you buying that book, and I think I had read the 4 Hour Body, and I had talked a lot about the 4 Hour Body. So this is
Tim Ferriss.
4 Hour Body, I think, was his first one.
I think it might have been. Then
he released 4 Hour Work Week pretty soon after.
Yeah.
And I remember you reading it. I hadn't read it yet, and you were just saying like, oh my God, this is blowing my mind right now.
Do I do a 4 Hour Work Week? I mean, have I done a 4 Hour Work Week since I read that book? No, but it did.
But what were some of the biggest principles?
Some of the biggest principles, I mean, we're talking about, one of the main things he was talking about is that wealth equals, time plus money, not just money. And, these are things that I obviously by now, and you obviously by now, having read a lot of self-help and immersed yourself in it, it seems common sense to us. But I mean, there are people in my life that are only just coming to this realization now, and they're coming to me going, did you realize that actually time plus money really is what makes you, rich? And then I've since read other books like, Robin Sharma, he has, 8 forms of wealth and that kind of thing, health, networking, social society. It's really important to, I think, educate people, well, not educate, but just in Hong Kong, we live in a very financially materialistic kind of focused society. And I think, I was just at that point, I was working long days in the wine industry. I was obviously drinking with my friends and then going out and drinking to sell wine. And then it was just long, and I could see myself not going down the right path. And it was just very taxing. And I just thought, I would love to be able to do 4 hours of coaching, enrich some kids' lives, be done by 6 o'clock, and have the same earnings as what I'm earning, and just have more time to do the things I want to do. So I think that was one of the key takeaways from the 4 Hour Work Week was the goal isn't about freeing up time to do nothing, right? It's about freeing up time to do more value-adding things. And initially I felt that I was value-adding things for the company. So, I start a company. If I can free up time, then I can do more value-adding things for the company. But then there are other elements of your life that you need to free up time for, that, your relationships, your health, all of these kind of things, your sense of adventure even. I know you take Thursday mornings off to allocate towards that, and that's excellent. I think the 4 Hour Work Week, one of the main things for me was about freeing up time to do more value-adding things. It wasn't free. He always talks about it's not about being the retired guy at 45 and he's overweight in a Lamborghini. It's about trying to have mini retirements, work manageable weeks and never retire. Essentially, that was his kind of message.
So, because I know that we were like both young entrepreneurs, and I think both went very headfirst into our businesses.
Oh yeah,
and I think that occupied a lot of our, I can certainly speak on behalf of myself. I became so laser focused,
tunnel vision
for so many years that kind of like everything else kind of fell to the wayside a little bit. Even like my friendships and my old friends, like including yourself, I was just so committed and immersed and like just loving it. But I think something that you inspired me to do when I kind of thought, how is he doing this? Like this, he's come in later than me, but you somehow found this way to create time in your week. And I think I arrived at that point a lot later than you did. It took me a lot longer.
Right.
I was very stuck between spending way too much time working in the business versus working on the business, right? But I think that's because a lot of my skill sets, my unique skill sets, as well as things that I really loved doing were to do with working in the business. It was coaching.
Oh, there's a time for that, for sure.
And I probably didn't have I hadn't cultivated the skill set to be able to work on the business. And so you get stuck in that loop, and it's very hard to break the cycle because you got to step back and you got to reallocate resources, and there's just a whole transformation process with that.
Which is impossible to face when you feel like you're, up to your eyeballs in the day-to-day stuff.
You're barely breathing.
Exactly.
You're putting out fires every single day.
Sure.
But I think that was something I thought was very admirable, and it was something that I inspired to want to try and get more of. And I'm at a place now where I feel like I really have that. And I think a lot of people would see my work. We could still think it's aggressive and it's a lot for someone who's been running a business for 15 years, but I genuinely love every little bit of my work that I do now.
Yeah.
And nothing feels hard.
Yes.
It's all very enjoyable work, and it's like I can choose to do that.
Yeah. So when did that happen for you then? When did that start to kind of fall into place?
I think the pandemic, honestly.
Okay.
I think like you, the pandemic, being forced to close was the first time so that was 2019, right?
Yeah.
That was the first time in 9 years that there was nothing I could do.
Yeah.
I mean, there's always something to do. You got to try and find a way to make your business survive. But
it wasn't
day-to-day coaching hours that filled up 12 hours of every single day were suddenly taken away. Like there was a point where we couldn't coach anyone.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, well, what do I do now? And it just gave me time and space to think. It didn't happen right away, but as the weeks kind of rolled on, and just having a bit more time in my day.
It probably allowed you to prove to yourself that the time that you were going to free up was value adding to the company, because you can always sit there when you're up to your eyeballs, delivering. You always think, if only I had the time, I would, do this, do that. I would help the business grow. But when you do find that time and you're operating at 90%, you're just too tired to actually muster up any creative.
And you don't have the evidence yet. You don't have the evidence to tell yourself that freeing up the time is actually going to move me in the business forward.
So it's kind of proof to yourself that's around you that actually, it's an injustice to the people that are working for you or working with you in your company if you have your head down too much, right?
And the thing is, I'd read every book that said the same thing. That said, don't,
of course.
You need to work on the business. You can't be, everything that I read, I was doing, but I was like, you justify it to yourself. You're like, no, I'm different. Business is growing. Look at the gym that we have. Look how happy everyone is. But actually, when time was basically when the busyness was taken from me involuntarily, it just gave me the space to then redirect my energy into something else. And then you start to see the fruits of your labor, and you start to see growth, and you start to see the impact that it has on everything. So I would say the pandemic in that first year was like a massive pivotal moment for me in the way that I now want to approach, my business and life.
Yeah, definitely.
And again, like you said, there is a time and place for everything. Like I don't regret those years at all.
No.
Like I acquired a lot of really good knowledge, expertise, skill sets.
Yep.
I'd learned how to grind and grit.
Sure.
And I'm just at a place now where I don't want to do that, and I don't want anyone in my company to do that.
Yeah.
I want to save them the burden of having to go through periods like that. I still want them to develop, grow, learn. I want them to be financially stable and, have a very lucrative career. I want them to have time to be able to play golf if they want to.
Yeah, of course.
Those are all things that I really want to have within my company now.
Yeah.
And I don't want to go back to those days.
Yeah. I mean, that's something we at the end of COVID, we had a situation where we could just tell, essentially for what we were doing, a coach could only coach 3 kids at a time because it was a 4-person group. So for a coach to hit 60 kids a week, they were going to have to do 15 classes. Whereas if you wanted to hit, 60 kids a week, and you were doing groups of 8, you could do that in, 6 or 7 classes, right? So people were just getting worked double, triple, and then, just to reach the same outcomes for the company and for them to, to impact the same amount of kids. So we kind of got to that point where we're thinking, right, we need to change something here because we were just surviving through COVID and people are just grinding. And I think a lot of people put to one side their mental health, the longevity, even their physical health. It was like, if I can make some money, because money was hard to come by in COVID, right? It was like, if I have to work 7 hours a day coaching and it's going to pay me, I'm just going to go and do it. I'm just going to go and do it. And I think we got to the end of 2022, just as COVID, 23 was when they dropped it last year, right? And then 2022, and we said, right, we got to change something here. So we started reducing the work days. We do Friday mornings off as a company so that we have time to do stuff together, or we have downtime that's just allocated before our busy period, which is the weekend. But yeah, I think it's a continual battle of trying to make sure that balance is in play, not just for yourself, but for those around you, right? Because it's not, these companies aren't vehicles just for us to feel comfortable. It should be, it's a community that we're building around us, and we want them to have the same kind of ability to balance their lives, like you said, right?
Yeah. What's driving you now? Like, what's keeping you going?
Well, now I have a son, so he's 2.5, almost 3, and he is in the program, and I'm watching him and his confidence and what he's gaining from it, which is really driving me actually to kind of just validates it from another angle. You can hear clients, giving you good feedback about their kids' experience and all that kind of thing. And coaches enjoying the classes, and you can see kids in videos. But I think when it's your own son, you can really see, his confidence grow. There's obviously a lot of times I've seen the videos of my helper sent through, and I'm like, oh my goodness, it's like he's all over the place. He's the kid picking up the phone all over the place. And, as funny as that might be for a little bit, like now, he's at a camp this week, and you can just see him just getting confidence. He's just learning what to do. And it's kind of just a great foundation for him to, be in a group environment, to learn basic cues of, when to take a turn, when to put your hand up, when to run, when to engage, when to be silly, when to be a bit more serious. So I think that's been a real drive for me to continually work with the team to improve the program. And
so is the drive to make sure that Rory just continues to develop himself as a kid, or?
Well, because Rory,
Rory's a proof that you're seeing that this is actually really
exactly. It's further proof that we're adding value to society. Essentially, people want their kids to be happy, and I can see he's happy in the program. But it's interesting because a lot of our kids do kind of taper off the weekly classes at 4.5. So Rory is only 2 years away from that, which is amazing when you think. He felt like a baby yesterday. But he's right in the middle of minisport at the moment. I can just see him kind of coming on, but. I think the opportunities that we can give the other people in the company are really interesting too. Like, I'd love for people to look back at their time with minisport, whether they've been with us for 6 months, 6 years, or 3 years, and just have good memories. Remember it was a time, maybe I didn't stay there forever, or maybe I did, but like...
You're talking about employees
here. Yeah. So for people to, remember good times, which is why these Friday mornings we try and have, we bowl, we go to yoga, do beach trips, we do stuff as a group, maybe every 3 weeks, just to try and create like a closer bond, especially after COVID, when everyone was so detached from each other. Having these isolated periods where people can spend in the same place is really unique. It's not like your business where everyone's in the same building all the time. We're at different sites all over the place, so it can get a little bit lonely. But yeah, seeing what opportunities we can give them, going into Singapore and other markets throughout the world. And we're aiming to go into at least 4 by this time next year, 4 different cities, being able to give them opportunities to travel, being able to give them opportunities to grow in their role. I always feel like a business is like a boat. The faster the front goes, the faster the boat goes, the bigger the wake is for everyone behind. So I just want to drive the business forward, as much for my own personal growth and reaching more children, but also for giving people in the company that opportunity to step up and keep moving forward. Because if we stand still, then that's everyone else standing still. So I'd say my drives are kind of seeing it through my son, and then trying to really just push my team and give them the experiences and memories that they'll benefit them for their careers and for their their families and for their livelihoods moving forward. Really.
And how much of the work that you actually do personally? How much of that work, do you love now? And I guess the other question is, is there anything that you do now that you dislike? Yeah.
So generally every November, just before we start the new year, I have a list of things that I don't want to do anymore next year, and they're just absolute no's. And
will you be open to sharing what were some of those things?
They were just little things, checking. People, there's some kind of checking people's NPFs were correct, or little things that I just hadn't delegated. They were my own fault. Should have delegated this ages ago. I can't remember exactly what was on the list, which is a good thing now because I'm not doing them. But then there's also on the other side of the page is what do you want to start doing more of. So I have a list of those things, and generally you want that list, I find, to be 2 or 3, maybe 4 things, because it will always probably end up being a couple more. But you can remember them off the top of your head. And whenever you catch yourself doing something that isn't one of those 4 things, you have to check, right, why haven't I delegated this? So delegating is definitely something that I am working on. It's it's, as you probably know as well, it's not just about getting stuff off your plate. It's about empowering and giving those people around you actually stuff that they can and want to do, so that's something that I'm learning and I'm enjoying doing, but it's an area for improvement for myself for sure. I enjoy so working on the app that we've built, just trying to optimize how we can make that app as good as, the best thing it can possibly be. It's something that I enjoy working on, working with the franchisees. So I see my next 3 to 5 years really helping the businesses in the other cities that we open up in to pretty much learn the mistakes I made over 10 years and, make sure they don't make them, and they can get their business close to where we are in 3 years as opposed to 12 years. So I do enjoy that kind of side of it. There's been a lot of discussion with potential franchise owners about, just supporting them and giving them a concept of an idea of what we do and how to tackle different challenges they're going to face in their markets. So I really enjoy that.
So you've almost moved from running your business, your employees, you're now kind of mentoring other gym owners.
It's kind of a hybrid at the moment.
Owners,
it's kind of a hybrid at the moment. We have a management team at Minisport who I really enjoy meeting with, great guys and really smart guys that all have their own roles within the company, and meeting with them to kind of brainstorm some fundamental things is really important. And I think the business has grown a lot since I started to involve other people in decision making, because for so long you think you're the one who knows best, and oftentimes, in fact, more often than not, you're probably not. Yep. So those guys are a great sounding board. I really enjoyed my time meeting with them, and bringing over young coaches. We bring over some guys from the UK and bringing some guys in locally, and just kind of trying to show them what they can learn through being on time, being responsible, delivering at a level, a service delivery level, and what that can do for them as people. I think that's a really, really good place to be. And hopefully, people, like I said, regardless of how long they've been with us, they do look back and think that they've learned things and created some good memories.
Do you see yourself doing this forever?
Well, I do not really know what I would do otherwise, to be honest. I mean, I kind of, for now, I don't really have like a 10, 20-year plan.
Has that been something that are you always like that? Are you always someone that doesn't have like long-term plans? Are you very much in the present?
Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah, because I'm always kind of like, we can optimize what we're doing in the next 6 months, 12 months, 8 months. I think, so isolated time.
With that said though, it sounds like you kind of have a vision for the next 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, 3 to 5 years, yeah. So, but people always say, oh, would you sell the business and this kind of thing? And to be honest, I don't think I really would, because I quite enjoy it. It's my brand. I really don't know what I would do otherwise. And I do feel like as long as I'm moving forward and the business is growing, there's going to be more responsibility for me and all the people around me, and we can all kind of keep growing through that. And who knows, never say never, but I think for now there's so much we can do to keep improving, and I'm really committed to doing that. So it's my life.
Do you have like any crazy lofty dreams and goals for Minisport? Like, what is there something you envision? I envision for Coastal Fitness, we have like a gym somewhere. I can just envision this like massive facility.
Right.
It has like an outdoor field, it has a swimming pool,
okay.
a running track.
Right.
It's an affiliate that has loads of people coming every day.
Yeah.
We run athlete camps. It's got recoveries, and it's somewhere that's like hot all year round. I don't know. I can envision that. I don't necessarily have a plan to get there, but I can just envision having that one day.
Yeah, I'd really like to have a charity, like an orphanage that was like a sports orphanage, or at least, we've done some work with quite a lot of charities, but we did a charity trip. Myself and our director of performance did a charity trip in October down to Phuket, and that was great to see.
That's cool.
Just help some kids, and we want to do a lot more of that in the coming months and years. Now, whether or not having your own place is just unnecessary and perhaps just based on ego because you want to have it, maybe you can, benefit more people by actually providing more to what's already there. For example, one thing that really struck me is we went down to an orphanage in October, and we took all this equipment, all this stuff with us on ourselves in our luggage. And we got there and we ran these sessions. And then after the first day, we said to them, like, have you guys got any of your own equipment? We didn't even think to ask. We just assumed they didn't, right? And they go, oh, yeah, 2 shipping containers full of equipment. So people are donating. But actually, none of the staff knew how to coach the kids. So we started coaching the staff to coach the kids. And I think to create like a sustainable model like that, where we can actually create lasting change, perhaps have some staff that we employ over there to kind of essentially take some of the money we're making here and pass it on to those other places. Again, it comes down to us wanting to do that and intrinsically wanting to help the kids, but like, for our staff to be able to have that experience of going over there, and it's enriching for everyone. So I think having our own place like that would be great, but I do feel like sometimes we have this end amazing goal that actually we could probably achieve 5 times more impact by tackling some of the problems, like sorting their storeroom out for them and teaching their teachers how to teach might actually have more of an impact than having this place of our own. So that's kind of the charity element is definitely something that we want to build on.
I felt like you really squashed my idea there. I was like, I want to have this. I want to selfishly have this sick gym, and you're like, yeah, I want to do.
I'll have a massive villa next to it.
Great stuff for humanity. I was like, oh, well, I want to do that as well. I actually watched.
Well, you could maybe every Friday morning you could open it up to the local community.
I watched this documentary, and as you were talking about the charity stuff, I was, which I think is awesome, by the way. Like that, I think that's really something. That's really like high level giving back to the world and leaving the world in a great, better place. So I love that. But I watched this documentary on a plane recently, and it was, I can't remember what the hell it was called, but it basically was all about businesses that built their models around basically charitable work or giving back to the planet. And as it was quite emotional. There was one point that I think I was very close to tearing up.
It was on the plane.
It was on the plane.
That's why.
Yeah. And but it just made me reflect on me, and I was like, what am I doing? How am I giving back to the world in a non-financially driven way? And so I actually got back, and so I spoke to Holly, who's on our operations team here, and she's really great with charity. She thinks about it all the time, and I kind of just put it out to her, said, we've done charitable things in the past. Yeah. Like we've worked with Hong Kong, Impact Hong Kong. We've done clothes drives, food drives as a community. And after watching that, I was like, I want to do this more. Right. I want to do these little things where we're doing small things. But I think, in hearing you wanted to do something just even bigger, having your own charity thing potentially. Yeah. I think I would also love to have something like that one day.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's great. I mean, you should share the links in the description.
I need to think
what that was, because that sounds great. It's definitely something I'd be keen to look into as well.
Yeah. Patterson, where can people find out more about you and Minisport?
So minisport.hk, our website, is the kind of place to learn about the brand. We have our new app, which is available in the App Store and Google Play. So just type in minisport.hk and you'll be able to create a child's profile, book and classes, learn about the program and the team and all of that kind of thing. And we have our Facebook and Instagram as well. So just minisport.hk is the handle for both of those. So that's where you can find out more about us.
Nice. Patterson, it's been an absolute pleasure, my friend.
Absolutely. That flew past.
Thanks for having me.